Welcome, welcome. I am excited to have you all here this evening. I hope you all have had a great day. We're going to get right into this Praxis workshop. Welcome, welcome. I see all the lovely guests here. The chat will be open to you. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. If you have a question, you may put that in the chat as well or raise your hand. I am your presenter this evening. I'm excited to be here. It's a great opportunity that the University of Memphis has afforded their students, the Praxis workshop on social studies. Praxis workshop on social studies. I am Dr. Alisa Wilson. This session is scheduled to last from 6 until 8 p.m. However, we will just see how the question and answering period goes. We may end up finishing prior to 8 p.m. We'll see, or we may go over. We'll see. Here's our agenda. I'll give you a moment to look at that. I see we have someone else entering. Yes, that's exciting. We are just getting started. We're going to review how the test is divided, what to consider prior to taking the test, and we're going to review the content under each division, as well as some question and answers. Okay. How's everybody doing this evening? We're all quiet.
Hello, I'm Ms. A. Reed. I'm doing pretty good. Just made it in from teaching the babies today.
I know, long days. Teachers
Yes.
have long days. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Well, welcome to everyone that has joined us, and we are just getting started. Tonight, we are going to review, hopefully, some really good tips for you and some questions that you can consider to study for the Social Studies Subtest 5004. This Social Studies test has been broken up into 3 different divisions. It's broken into the United States history, government and citizenship, as well as geography, anthropology, and sociology, and the world history and economics section. There are now 60 questions to this test, approximately 27 for that first division, 18 for that second, and 15 for the third. And so I have selected questions for us to review, with the majority of those questions coming from that first section, since that's the heaviest area, or the area that you'll have the most questions on, at 45%. And as you can see there, it's broken down to 30 and 25%. You will also have a constructed response portion to this test, unless it's decided before you take your test that that's not going to be included. That is still being debated. So it may still be included when you take the test, or it may not. Here are a couple of disclaimers. I have successfully passed the first time many Praxis tests, including the one that this workshop is going to hopefully prepare you to take. And here's some of my personal advice. I'll give you a few moments to read through those bullet points, and then I'm going to highlight 1 or 2 for you. The 1 or 2 that I would like to highlight are the second bullet point. You must be confident in what you know. I have spoken to many pre-service teachers, current teachers who have taken this test and other Praxis tests, and the number one complaint I hear from them on why they did not pass the test or did not receive a passing score was because they really did not think that their answers were correct at the time that they were choosing them. So it's really important that you're confident when you are taking the test. And I know that test anxiety is real, but try your best, try your very best to, as the first bullet point says, which is my second point, I want to reiterate that you are calm taking the test. You've taken time to take care of your bodily needs, such as getting some rest, and you've eaten prior to taking the test. Those 2 points are just so very, very important as you prepare to take this Praxis test and any other Praxis tests that you plan to take. Let me go ahead and highlight one third point, and that is that you need to believe in yourself most of all. I can't overemphasize that one as well. It's equally important as the other 2 points that I pointed out. If you're going to guess, I suggest you go on your first guess. Oftentimes we doubt ourselves, and sometimes we really shouldn't do that. We know more than we think that we know. How to approach unfamiliar formats. So you may or may not be familiar with some of the formats that you'll be presented with when you take this test. I'll give you another moment or so to read through this information and the quick tip. This information was taken straight from Praxis. All right, we're going to move on. Understanding the constructed response questions. The constructed response questions are going to require you to demonstrate your knowledge in this overall subject area of social studies. You're going to be creating your response based on your prior knowledge. You may also include some of the information that you received as you went through the questions. I really encourage you to do that. Perhaps you're not as up to speed on whatever that constructed response question is asking you. Oftentimes there are questions that you've answered prior to getting to that constructed response question that can help you, can support your answer. And so really try to consider that when you get to your constructed response questions. There may be something that you answered earlier in the test that could definitely be included in your response. I'll give you all another moment to review this information, which was taken directly from the Praxis website. Please let me know if I am going too quickly. I'm going to try to pace myself so that I'm not going too quickly, but if you have that comment, please drop it in the chat and I will adjust the speed at which I am going through these slides. So let's keep these things in mind when you plan to respond to your constructed response question. Answer the question accurately. Answer the question completely. Answer the question that is asked. You will receive no credit or a low score if you answer another question or if you state, for example, that there's no possible answer. So do not change the question or challenge the basis of the question. Just answer the question as it is. Give a thorough and detailed response. Tell in your writing as much as you can about that question. Just give as much information as you can that is directly related to that question. And then before you press that submit button, reread your response. Check that you have written what you thought you wrote. Something else may come to your mind after you go back and you reread what you were responding, what you were saying or writing. So make sure you check what you've written and make sure that that's exactly what you wanted it to say. Be sure not to leave sentences unfinished. Of course, we want to make sure that we have clarifying information. And this was a quick tip they gave, and I think it's a really good tip. You may find that it is helpful to take notes on scratch paper so that you don't miss any details of the actual constructed response question. And usually they, depending on the testing site that you are located at, they will have paper. If not, they will allow you usually to bring in your own paper, but most times they have paper available for you to use. I recommend you take notes and record your answers tonight as I review this content with you. Consider what I covered strictly as foundational for your understanding. Okay, you can expound on what makes sense from what you know. You may want to dig a little bit deeper on certain questions that you may have not received the correct answer, guessed, or put the right answer down on your paper for. But answer the questions when you actually take the test based on your knowledge, what you actually know. I suspect you'll be surprised, I really do, at how many questions you will get correct. The first section that we're going to review some questions on is called United States History, Government, and Citizenship. And remember, that's 45% of the test. So we want to make sure we have a good grasp on the United States history. And we know it's a lot of history, right? When you're thinking about studying for this test, you want to think about the highlights of our history, if I could say it that way. Our government, how it was structured at the beginning. And this is history, so it's not so much current day, but how it was formed, how our government was formed, and there are going to be citizenship questions as well. So let's get started. Hopefully you have some paper and pencil. If not, I strongly encourage you to get paper and pencil as we go through these suggested questions and answers. You can jot down some notes for yourself, maybe something to go back and study further, or congratulate yourself because you have all the answers correct. So first, before I give you a couple of questions, I want to just cover some really important points when it comes to our United States history, government, and citizenship, just to kind of remind you of some things that I'm sure all of you all have learned over the years. So historians generally recognize that there are three main reasons why the European explorers came to the New World, which is North, South America, the New World. And they are pretty much summarized as God, gold, and glory. You'll hear it referred to in different ways, but basically people wanted to come over to, from the European countries, they wanted to come over to the New World because they wanted religious freedom. And I'm sure you've heard that before. They were after gold, literally gold, but riches. They thought there were precious gems they were going to find, gold, anything that was going to be worthy of them trading among other countries so that they could gain more money. And so that's about the economics of coming to the New World. And then glory. Man has always been power driven, and back then was no different. No different. Who was going to capture the most land, have the most land, have the most people? So God, gold, and glory were definitely three main motives for European exploration. And here's some key vocabulary terms. Well, this is just one in particular, the Mayflower Compact. I'll give you a moment to read that. I'm sure you've heard about it, learned about it, maybe many years ago, but try to familiarize yourself with it because it was significant in our history. Now, there are a couple of causes of the American Revolution. And so there are some key terms and information I want you to recall from your past history classes or social studies classes. One being the American Revolution. It was sometimes referred to as the War for Independence. So in a test question, they may refer to it as the American Revolution of 1776, or just Revolution of 1776, or the War of Independence. This was an uprising of the colonies in America against Great Britain. So most people do remember this, but I just wanted to highlight it anyway. The colonists were greatly influenced by the philosophy of John Locke, which, if you recall, he was associated with the Enlightenment period. Now look at bullet point 2 and 3. You may or may not remember this from your social studies classes, but I want to give you a moment to read this information. It may come back to your memory, some activity or some exercise you did when you were learning this information back in social studies. If you find that you're not that familiar with the French and Indian War, for example, you might want to make a note and go back and read a little bit about the time that it took place, who was involved in it. Of course, France and Native Americans, but there were other countries that were involved as well. And where did it take place? Go back and look that information up. You also want to remember that phrase that I'm sure most people have heard at some point in their life: representation without taxation. You're bound to see a question or two on your test about that. This is one of the main grievances of the colonists. They were being taxed, but there was no representation of the colonies over in Great Britain. The Ohio River Valley. If you don't recall information on these key areas, Proclamation of 1763, the French and Indian War, Ohio River Valley, John Locke, what was the Enlightenment period? Take time to make a note of that and go back. And I'm not saying you have to write a thesis, but go back and just familiarize yourself with that information, because you're bound to have at least one question on those areas. Now let's think about how the 13 original colonies were organized. You may recall learning about the 13 original colonies. Let's refresh our memory. The 13 original colonies were divided into 3 different sections: the northern, the middle, and the southern. Sometimes the northern, colonies were referred to as the New England colonies. You may have heard that terminology before. I suggest strongly that you memorize these 13 original colonies. It's going to help you tremendously on so many questions. There are only 13, so I know you can do this. The northern colonies, a lot of the questions I found were somewhat leading in a way, because we know the northern colonies, well, all the colonies are on the coast, on the eastern coast of our country. And we know that in the northern colonies that it's colder. Let's just use some of our knowledge that we already know. We know it's colder. So what might be some ways that they chose to have an income, since they're on the northern end of our country? Think logically in that way. And then think about the middle colonies. They're often referred to as the breadbasket colonies. Think about what happens in New Jersey, New York, Delaware, Pennsylvania. And if you're not familiar with what actually occurs in those middle states, you might want to take time to do just a little deeper dive, And Google is Excellent. Go to Google University and get a little bit more information on those middle colonies. And then the southern colonies. I think most people are very familiar with the southern colonies because they start thinking about the slaves actually coming to the southern colonies. And why did they come? It was so that they could help with all these crops that were being being farmed in the southern colonies. And why was that? Because the weather was so much better. It was better conditioned for slavery to be prosperous in the South because those fields were growing and doing so well for their economy. The first Constitution. So you may recall that we had the Articles of Confederation prior to the actual Constitution that we live under today. So the Articles of Confederation provided some things nationally and some things for the state. We know that we didn't have all the states that we have today. We only had the 13 colonies at that time. So this is a great picture of what was under the Articles of Confederation. Look at what was considered at the national level, what was considered at the state level, and what was something that was joint between, what were the somethings that were joint between the national level or the federal level and the state level. Both could print money. We already see that that could be a problem, and it was. They both could print money. They both could pass laws. They both could maintain law and order. They both could have banks. You could have federal banks and you could have state banks. And then they both could borrow money. So we can see how there was much controversy that could happen and did happen as a result of the Articles of Confederation, which is why we now have the Constitution, which is why they met and came up with a second Constitution, which stuck and is now our Constitution of the United States. The weaknesses in the Articles of Confederation convinced the leaders of the United States that our country needed a strong central government. But remember, we did not want to have so strong of a government that it would mimic what the king was doing to us, the colonists from England. So that was a very sensitive time, and we need to think about how the colonists may have felt at that time when they were writing the Constitution, because all of them agreed we don't want to have all the power centrally located, because we just came from that. We just were under that with the King of England telling us what to do, taxing us without representation. So this was a very intense time. Take that into consideration as you're answering questions related to the Articles of Confederation and the actual Constitution that we live under today. As this statement has included, there were many states that were not going to sign off on this new great Constitution unless there were rights for the individuals and rights for the states. And so there were 10 amendments that were added to this Constitution, which we know as the Bill of Rights. Today, we know there are, I want to say, 27 amendments at this time. So the first 10 amendments were the Bill of Rights. And in school, you may have been asked to memorize all 10 of those. If you don't recall what the Bill of Rights are, you couldn't recognize a Bill of Rights, please make a note, go back and actually look at what each Bill of Rights is. We're not going to go through that tonight, but go back and just familiarize yourself with each Bill of Rights. All right, let's go into practicing some questions. After each question, I'm going to actually go over the answer as well. I think this is going to be very beneficial to you. At least I hope that it is. So here's our first question. Which pairing best describes the purpose for the establishment of that colony? Is it A, Plymouth, and then this is the purpose? To enable Britain to have a supply of iron and timber, Massachusetts Bay for economic and political freedoms, Jamestown to provide land for settlers from other areas of America, or New Amsterdam, which we know is present-day New York, to become a major area of business and trade. Which pairing best describes the purpose for that establishment? So you may or may not remember this. You may have to make an educated guess. A, B, C, or D. Go ahead and make an educated guess. And let's see if you were able to either answer it correctly or make an educated guess that happened to be correct. The correct answer was D. The correct answer was D. I wonder, should we, Ms. Perkins, have the answer put into the chat?
They're putting it in the chat.
Awesome, awesome. So why don't you just tell me what the majority has chosen for an answer? Did they choose D?
So several of them actually chose C and B, and we have C, B, and D. So you should be able to pull up that chat.
Yes, ma'am, I can. Yes, ma'am, I can. I just wasn't sure if when I'm sharing my screen, if you could see it as well.
We are still able to see, and also the students can use the reaction buttons if you'd like for them to share what their answer is.
Oh, okay. Okay. This is fine. That looks good. That looks good. I can see how you would have chosen B or any of these actually, unless you just really knew the correct answer. New Amsterdam was established with the goal of becoming a major area of business and trade. And I kind of tried to give you a little hint that it's now our present day New York. And so we know that New Amsterdam back then and New York today is a major area for business and trade. A lot of economic decisions happen in New York. So let's go to the next question. In studying cause and effect in history, which of the following factors is the most important in determining the subsequent effect of one event on another? What do you think this answer might be? Okay. This is great. You are absolutely correct. I see many of you chose C, and C is the correct answer. Let's go back to that. That is the correct answer. Chronology is generally considered the key aspect of cause and effect, and it establishes a sequence of events. So hopefully you use that prior knowledge that you have of what cause and effect actually is by itself, just those definitions, and you were able to choose the correct answer, chronology. Excellent. Excellent. See, you guys are bright, bright. Which of the following was not a challenge faced by leaders of the early American Republic? Now, sometimes people don't like these not questions, but they're actually not that bad. No pun intended on the not. But which of the following was not a challenge? So that means that there's 3 that were a challenge. So it's easy to look at, okay, I know this was a challenge. I know that was a challenge faced by the leaders. Okay, so the only one that's left must be the answer for the not. And this is a challenge, so something that was difficult. Okay, I see that many of you have chosen A. And what if I told you A was not correct? So make a second guess. What would be your second guess? Bingo, Miss Lauren and Miss Reed, excellent. Yes, the correct answer was a new population of freed slaves. Slavery continued to be practiced in the new United States as it had in the colonies. A sudden increase in the population of freed slaves would not become a national issue until after the Civil War. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, it did not become a national issue until after the Civil War. So let's go on to our next question. You guys are doing a great job. Which of the following did not, another not, influence American colonists' decision to seek independence from Great Britain? That means that 3 of these did influence, was a reason why the American colonists wanted to seek independence, wanted to break away from Great Britain. 3 of these was a legitimate reason. Why did they want to leave that hold of Great Britain, that hold of the king? And then the one that's left is going to be your answer. Excellent, excellent. You guys are going to do well. Yes, B. B was the correct answer. Yes, the French government offered to financially support the colonists' war against the British. However, I mean, this was not a major reason. This was not a major reason or influence for the colonists' decision to seek independence from Great Britain. Excellent. Here's our next question. The colony of Maryland was founded as a place of religious refuge for whom? What do you think? The colony of Maryland. Savannah, I don't know how you came up with your answer, you or Denise, but you are absolutely correct. The answer was B, Catholics. Roman Catholics experienced great persecution. So they sought a place of religious refuge. And that's what they wanted to happen, especially in the state of Maryland. And what you'll find when you look at the 13 colonies is that each colony was formed basically for a cause or for a reason. So Catholics were still in the minority and they never numbered more than 10% of the population. So they were definitely looking for Maryland to be their refuge, their place of refuge in the new country. Which of the following industries was most responsible for the economic success of the New England colonies? What do you think, considering geographically where they're located, and what you may already know about those New England colonies that are now states? What do you think caused the most economic success for them? See some brave souls. You are absolutely correct. Thank you so much, Coriana and Anita and Denise. You were right on. Yes, shipbuilding. Much of the commerce of New England relied on that ocean traffic between Europe. You've got that Atlantic Ocean right there. And shipbuilding was a major industry in the colonies. Common sense. I remember learning about Common Sense by Thomas Paine. It was not fun in middle school. I think we got introduced to it in the 5th grade. But Common Sense by Thomas Paine helped inspire which of the following? Which one do you think it helped inspire? Common sense. Common sense. Let's see, there are a couple of brave souls. And they are absolutely correct. It was B, the American Revolution. Yes. Anita, you want to come off the mic to tell us why you thought B? Do you want, you don't have to. What were you saying?
Well, I think the reason why I chose B because I just looked at it and I just took a guess at it.
Okay.
And I just took a guess at it. That's what I came up with.
And you know what? I think you should rely on your educated guesses because you guessed correctly. All right, here's our next question. Constitutional government in the United States is aimed at protecting which of the following? Thank you so much for sharing, Anita. Constitutional government in the United States is aimed at protecting which? Would our constitutional government aim at protecting the powers of the president, the rights of the people, the rule of aristocracy? Excellent. You guys are absolutely right. The rights of the individual. Yes, the rights of the individual. Yes, the Constitution limits the powers of the federal and the state government so that the rights and freedoms of the individuals are protected. Yes, that's what makes people want to flood to our country. Yes, let's go to the next question. Which of the following most correctly explains a key conflict between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists regarding the ratification of the U.S. Constitution? Got to really think about what was the difference between the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist. And let me help you out. National is also synonymous with federal. So you have the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist. And they definitely were in conflict with each other when it came to ratifying this new government. Let's see, what do you think? Again, excellent. I think you guys have the answer somewhere. You're absolutely right. Miss A. Reed and Gabrielle and Trinity, you're absolutely right. Anita, Lauren, thank you. C, you're absolutely right. The Federalists supported a strong central government, while the Anti-Federalists thought centralized power would be vulnerable to corruption, and they sought to maintain power in the individual states. And this is something that will probably help you on other questions, if you can tell the difference between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. So remember, the Federalists, they support a strong central government. They're all for the federal government. And the Anti-Federalists, they are more for the states. Excellent. All right, the Proclamation of 1763 was intended to forbid colonists to settle lands where? This is where, if you don't remember that proclamation, you may have to make an educated guess. The Proclamation of 1763. Now we know 1776, that's when we celebrate our Declaration of Independence. So this is prior to that, 1763. That proclamation was intended to forbid colonists to settle lands where? This came from the king of England, from Great Britain. England, Great Britain, synonymous, same place. Let's see what we have. Again, you're absolutely correct. I don't know if you guys have the answers somewhere or you're just brilliant. Amazing. Denise, thank you. You and several of your peers, they have all come up with the correct answer. That's excellent. Yes, C. The Proclamation of 1763 was meant to stop the colonists from settling in the Ohio River Valley. That's the land that's between the Ohio River and the Great Lakes. So this proclamation, of course, enraged the colonists, okay? Because they felt they had participated in the French and Indian War for the right to that Ohio River Valley. And now the king is saying, you're being denied the fruit of the victory. Yes. The Quartering Acts. The Quartering Acts were intended to accomplish what among the American colonies? The Quartering Acts, there's actually a Bill of Rights that talks about quartering. So when we are referring to quartering, we're talking about housing. Some people still refer to, sometimes I'm kidding around and I'll say, oh yeah, my guest rooms, those are my spare quarters. So the Quartering Acts, they were intended to accomplish what among the American colonies? Let's see what you guys have chosen as an answer. You're absolutely correct. To station large numbers of British troops in the colonies. Britain sought to remind the colonists, hey, we're ever present. We're right there. And we're going to force you to let us live in your houses because we're the reason why you're there and able to sustain being there. So we're going to force you to allow our British soldiers to live in your homes. Can you imagine that happening today? That would not go over well. Here's the next question. Which of the following describes an effect of the Glorious Revolution in 1688? So this is before the colonists have been settled over here for a while. First colonists arrived much earlier than this in the 1500s, but there was a glorious revolution happening over in Europe. If you're not sure what it was, just take an educated guess. It actually was the establishment of the English Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights, which we know influenced our Constitution. So it secured the power of the Parliament over the monarchy over there. So yeah, it definitely was something that was considered when we were looking at our Bill of Rights over here in our new country. Which of the following best identifies the core influence of the Mayflower Compact on later conceptions of government in the United States? The Mayflower Compact was actually written on the ship, the Mayflower, as it was sailing across the Atlantic Ocean, coming to the shores of this new world. The people on the Mayflower were talking about, okay, how do we want to set up camp once we get over there? Who's going to be the leader? Who's not going to be the leader? What's going to happen as far as rules? Are we going to have any rules? So the Mayflower Compact also was part of the conversation when they were looking at forming a constitution. And you are absolutely right. I love these educated guesses. C is the correct answer. The Mayflower Compact was an example of a civil social contract in which the citizens of a government were united and they agreed these are the laws we're going to follow. And they, like I said, they talked about this and agreed to this compact while they were still sailing the Atlantic Ocean. So let's go on to the next section, geography, anthropology, and sociology. These questions can sometimes be easier than the history questions, but it just kind of really depends on the person. Other people might not find them as easy as the other questions. So let's see how you do. Which of the following continents is located both in the Eastern and Western hemisphere? So this is, we're talking about geography. So if you're a little rusty on geography, you may want to make a note. I need to check on my geography, know what countries are in which hemispheres. So I'll give you a moment. The Eastern and the Western, they're in both Eastern and Western hemispheres. Let's see what we have here. Okay. The majority of you guys are absolutely correct. It's D, Europe and Africa. Europe and Africa. So you all are absolutely correct. Both continents are located in both the Eastern and the Western hemisphere. So excellent, excellent, excellent. Excellent. Which of the following is most likely a lasting influence? I think I've messed my questions up, my origin of my questions. Oh no. Let me go back. Here we go. Which of the following is most likely a lasting influence that ancient Romans had on modern society? Which of these listed, A, B, C, or D, is most likely a lasting influence ancient Romans had on modern society? Which one do you think? If you're not sure, let's make an educated guess. And the key phrase is a lasting influence. Which one do you think was a lasting influence on our modern society? Like we still have it today. I love how Miss A. Reed said, oh, wait, it's C. You're absolutely correct. The development of Republican democracy. Before it was an empire, Rome was a republic led by senators elected to the Senate. So the answer was C. The answer was C. Which of the following best describes a way that ancient Egyptians adapted the environment to support their civilization? You got to think about, how did they adapt their environment to support their civilization, to support the people that live there? Excuse me. And you also have to think about where Egypt is located in Africa. Let's see, what do we think the answer is? Tamika, you are absolutely correct. The correct answer was A, they built canals. Yes, to facilitate irrigation and support agriculture. Yes, very important, very important. Which of the following was not a cause of urbanization in the US in the 1800s? Remember, we have society questions under this section. Which of the following was not a cause of urbanization in the US in the 1800s? That means 3 were a cause of urbanization. 3 were the cause of cities being built, but 1 wasn't. You're absolutely right. The correct answer was D, widespread drought. Yes. This was not a particular driver of migration in the 1800s. Drought was more significant in the 30s during the Dust Bowl. Yeah. So which of the following is the most common reason for forests to be cut down in developing countries? Think about that question. What is it asking you? What is the most common reason for forests to be cut down? And then in a developing country, it's going to be different if it's in an already established country, but in a developing country, what would be the most common reason for the forest to be cut down? You guys are absolutely amazing. Yes, D is the correct answer. To make the land suitable for farming. Yes, they've got to have that land, so they got to cut the trees down, unfortunately. The spread of Buddhism from India to China is an example of what? Now we know we can eliminate. You guys are very familiar with eliminating two. I know you are. You know how to just throw out two right from the jump. You know it's not going to be trade, and you know it's not going to be migration. So that's going to leave you with either A or B. So let's see if we have the correct answer. Excellent. Yes, diffusion. Yes, A is the correct answer. Excellent. Diffusion occurs when the ideas of one culture are passed on to another. Excellent. A teacher is explaining to her class how advancements in aviation led to increased imports of goods from other countries. Now, this example best demonstrates the impact of human innovation on what? I'll give you all a moment to think about that. Do I have a volunteer to come off of mute to tell us why you chose the answer you chose?
I chose A because in the explanation it said imports. That's the word that stuck out to me. So I chose A for travel.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else want to share that didn't choose A? Why you chose the answer you chose? Let's see, there are a couple of you guys that chose another answer, chose B. Anybody want to share why they chose B? Thank you very much for sharing. I appreciate that.
I chose B, the economy, because if you have increased imports, it usually helps trade and it betters the economy because you're getting more from each country.
Excellent, excellent. And you're absolutely correct. It was B, the economy. This example demonstrates the effect on the economy because goods become available at a cheaper price. So yes, yes, I would have to choose between A and B if I wasn't exactly sure, but I knew I could eliminate C and D from this this question's answers. So that's excellent, excellent, excellent. The correct answer again was B, the economy. An area with which of the following features is likely to have a high population density? I'm going to give you a moment to think about the question. These are all describing an area, but which one of the following features is likely to have a high population density? Let's see what answer you guys have chosen. You all are doing an amazing job. Let's see what answers we see here. We've got B, D. Okay. Lauren says she's certain it's D. Okay. Anybody want to come off of mute and tell me why you chose D?
I chose D because if there's an abundant amount of resources, that means that more people will be able to live there without running out of resources.
Excellent. Excellent. I like how you were thinking. Excellent. And the reason why I want you all to share sometimes on why you chose that answer is so that if another person is not thinking that way, they can see how you were thinking and maybe make that connection to the question and then what you're saying as far as how you were thinking. Thinking aloud is so powerful. It's so powerful. But you're absolutely correct. D was the correct answer. People are likely to settle in an area with abundant and easily accessible resources. So yes, excellent, excellent. Good job. So the last section that I'm going to go over is called World History and Economics. So these questions are going to relate to not the United States, but other countries in the world. So if you are good with American history, you should feel pretty good taking the test because the majority of your questions, 45% of them, are going to be based on American history, but 25% are going to be on world history. So you kind of have to figure out for yourself where you might need to do more studying than another. Let me see what is in the chat here. Okay. Excellent. I love that. I love that you all are talking to each other. That's really good. Let's be encouraging to each other. So world history and economics, are we ready? Let's go to our first question. Which of the following emerged during World War I? Got to think about it. Which of the following emerged during World War I? We're going to spend a little time to think on these questions because I think they might tend to be a little bit harder since they are world questions, world history questions, and not American. Oftentimes we do remember our American history more so than our world history. Okay, we've got B, A, B. We've got even an A and a D. Okay. Anybody want to share their thought process and how they came up with their choice? First, you had to think about when was World War I? What
I think
year?
I'm sorry.
No, go on.
Okay, I think I chose B. I think because when I think of World War I think about the planes
the planes a lot, and then what they had to carry the weapon when they had to carry and transport the weapons. I think.
Excellent. You are absolutely.
Oh my God! Okay.
Yes, you are. You should be very proud of yourself. If you were not thinking about aircraft carriers in relation to World War I, you have got to start thinking that. Because this young lady, I think it was a young lady, you are absolutely correct. Yes, aircraft carriers. The first time an airplane flew from a ship was in 1912. Yes, excellent. Oh, you should be so proud of yourself. I hope you're doing a little happy dance right now. A little happy dance.
Yes, because I also thought about Captain America. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. However you get the correct answer, okay? However you get the correct answer. That is awesome. So which of the following factors might contribute to inflation? We got to think about this one. I'm going to give you guys a few moments longer than the other question. Okay. I like Lauren says, I'm not real sure, but I think it's C or D. Okay. B or C. Thank you for being honest, guys. This is so good. Somebody said D, maybe. Lauren said maybe D. Not so sure. C, okay. And Tamika, you said you meant, oh, D and not B. Okay. All right, again, does anyone want to share their thought process? How did you come up with the answer that you chose? This is a safe place. You could come off mute. We're not making fun of anyone because we're all
Okay,
learning.
safe place. Safe place. Okay.
Safe place.
I looked at the keyword inflation. When I
Okay.
think about inflation, I think about like a significant decrease. And then I
Okay.
also was thinking about when money was very, very low. But then again, I was in between C and D.
Mm-hmm. But
Yeah,
you're on the right, you're on the right track. You're on the right track. Maybe somebody can help you.
okay.
Anybody else have any thoughts to add to that? You're definitely, and you know, this is real. Like we're living this way now, right? We've got the inflation happening right now. So think about it. You're definitely on the right track. Anybody want to add?
Yes, I said B or C. I said B because I just thought about now, well, COVID, how everybody was basically unemployed, and now we're going through inflation because of that. And I thought C because, low amount of printed currency. So it's like we already don't have that much money. So, that was just my thought.
Okay. Anybody else want to share their thoughts? Any more brave souls out there want to share?
I thought, oh, go ahead.
Well, when I thought about inflation, I was thinking about the gas prices and how they just keep going up. But like, it seems like some gas stations are out of business or something. So I just chose D.
Okay. Very interesting. And someone else was speaking, beginning to speak at the same time as you.
Yeah, I chose D because like everyone else says, when I think of inflation, I think of less supply, so they make the price go up. And maybe since, like, I thought maybe it was a large amount of printed currency because they can raise the price and they know people will pay that for it, like we'll be able to afford it, and they're trying to balance that out.
You are absolutely correct. You need to do a happy dance. Absolutely correct. Those of you that chose D, you chose the correct answer. You chose the correct answer. A decrease in supply and a large amount of printed currency, because inflation occurs when prices increase. Okay, so both of these factors contribute to inflation. A decrease in supply and a large amount of printed currency. So inflation occurs when prices increase. Sorry about that. Now, C usually contributes to deflation. If you want to make a note of that, just the opposite, deflation. So C would be the answer if we were wanting to know what contributes to deflation. But inflation occurs when prices increase. And just like that young lady just said, large amounts of money are printed because items are costing more. So excellent, excellent. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Oh no, I'm going the wrong direction again. That's my fault. Which of the following most contributed to the fall of the ancient Egyptians? And for some reason, I don't know why, but when I took this test many moons ago, there were many questions related to the Egyptians. And then a pre-service teacher was telling me just in the last year that there were a lot of questions on her test related to Egypt. And I don't know why. I don't know why that is. And so I don't know if that'll be the case when you decide to take the test or not. But if you need to brush up on your ancient Egypt history, you might want to do that. You might want to do that. And you may not know the correct answer off the top of your head, so then you may have to make an educated guess. But which of the following most contributed to the fall of the ancient Egyptians? Which one do you think? Because they were riding high. And then this happened and they fell. Thank you, Lauren, for being honest, because that was my mistake that I messed up and showed you guys the answer. But thank you so much for being honest. You are absolutely right. We'll just move on. It was the death of Cleopatra, because after Cleopatra's death, ancient Egypt became part of the Roman Empire. So it definitely, thank you, Ariana and Anita as well. You chose the correct answer, the death of Cleopatra. And fascinating life. If you're not familiar with Cleopatra's life, fascinating, fascinating woman, fascinating woman. Let's move on to the next question. Which of the following is the most important result of Pharaoh Menas's unification of Upper and Lower Egypt? Well, that's a mouthful of a question. So I'm going to give you a moment. You definitely have to think about Pharaoh Menas's unification and the fact that there was an Upper and a Lower Egypt. And if you don't recall what was happening under Pharaoh Menes, then you're going to have to make an educated guess on a question like this. So you'll go through your choices and think about, okay, it says most important result of this unification, bringing the two Upper and Lower Egypt together. So what was the most important result? What could have happened after bringing both the Upper and the Lower Egyptians together? Upper and Lower Egypt coming together, they're unified now. What could be an important result of that? Sometimes you can work through the question and come up with the correct answer if you don't outright know the correct answer. Of course, knowing the correct answer is always best, but sometimes you can work through what you think might be the correct answer by looking at what's given to you in the question. Let's see what we have in the chat. B, perhaps. Okay, A or B, C, A or B. Nobody thinks it's D, which is good because the correct answer is not D. So you have to choose A, B, or C. Yeah, there were many pharaohs, Ms. Reed. So I don't know how to tell you which ones to catch up on. There were many pharaohs, some more popular than others, but many pharaohs. Many pharaohs. Okay, anybody else want to share what thought process they went through to come up with their answer, or did you just outright know the correct answer? I do see the correct answer listed. We know it was not D. We're talking about unification, so we're not talking about between these regions. So we know it's not D.
I didn't type my answer, but I think it could be B because it's just better. If you think about it, it's like if we fight within our country, how can we fight off others outside of our country? So it's like if we are stronger together, basically. So if we unify, then we'll be stronger so we can fight off the outside threat.
And you know what, you raise a good point, and that is a good answer. But on these questions, they try to, it's not like they try to trick you, they really don't. A lot of these questions are very straightforward questions that they give you, but it does say the most important. So you're absolutely right, but that's not the correct answer for this question, but you're absolutely right, and you're on the right track to think that. And I could see very well how you could come up with that. But there's an answer that is the correct answer. It's most important. It was the most important result. So that when you see most important, that just means that there's more than one answer that's probably true, but one is more important than the other one. And so, Ariana, you're absolutely right. The correct answer is A. The correct answer is A. The greatest political movement in Egypt was the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. Due to the efforts of this Pharaoh Meneses or Menes, different people pronounce it different ways, and I'm definitely not Egyptian. So Pharaoh, I'm going to say Menes. The unification solidified the empire of Egypt. Of course, it was stronger, just as our colleague and peer said, they were stronger together when they united the Upper and Lower Egypt. It allowed them to focus on the cultivation of culture and the creation of monuments rather than spending their time on civil war, because that was wasting their time. So they were better together, like she stated, better together. So excellent. I like how you were thinking. I like how you all were thinking. Let's go to the next question. The Cold War era was marked by all of the following except. That's just like those not questions. So that means 3 did mark the Cold War era, and then 1 did not. So the Cold War era was marked by 3. So see if you can pick out those 3, and then the one that's left is going to be your answer. And the United States, of course, participated in the Cold War era, as well as other countries. I love it. You guys are brave. We've got a D and a C. Come on, what do you think? Got another D. And you're absolutely, I think you're spot on, Ms. Perkins. There will probably be a question on the Cold War. You have to really think about what you know about the Cold War. So if you don't remember or you don't have any information to recall on the Cold War, you definitely need to read up on the Cold War. And Ms. A. Reed, America did participate in the Cold War. We did participate in the Cold War. However, A is not the correct answer. So with that being said, look at your choices again. And really, if you're familiar with the Cold War, this question is like so easy. So you definitely, if you're not familiar with the Cold War, there was something that was the main, I guess, focal point of the whole Cold War era. And so that's what this answer is. So if you're not familiar with the Cold War, you definitely want to jot down a note to find out, okay, what countries participated in the Cold War? What was the Cold War era about? When did it take place? What were the years that it took place? And what was the gist of the Cold War? What was it basically about? What was a result of the Cold War era? What caused the Cold War era? Those are the kind of questions you want to answer. Okay, Lauren said to put someone into space. Okay. Okay. I like how you guys are thinking. I like that, Lauren. So it wasn't actually what we consider a war in general terms. That's why it was the Cold War. A hot war would be between actual bodies and weapons. Well, weapons were involved in this. I'm kind of giving away the answer now. I might as well share it now, Lauren. Everybody knows the correct answer now. The correct answer was C, the use of nuclear weapons in small wars. So Lauren, you were absolutely right. Cold War was a play on the term war. So we don't usually say a war is hot, but because there were no actual casualties as a result of this war, it was called a Cold War. And we don't say hot war, but this was referred to as the Cold War era. So while both countries threatened the use of nuclear weapons, you got to find out who those countries were involved in the Cold War. Both countries threatened the use of nuclear weapons. They were not used in this Cold War. So the use of nuclear weapons in small war. Remember, that was the exception. The Cold War was marked by an American policy of containment. Yes. The formation of military alliances. Yes, that happened in the Cold War. The use of espionage and subversion. That all happened during the Cold War. What didn't happen was the use of nuclear weapons in small wars. The Cold War was marked by all of the following except the use of nuclear weapons in small wars. All right, let's go to another question. How did the Silk Road impact warfare during the early Middle Ages? Man, you got to really go back. Early Middle Ages. There were Middle Ages and late Middle Ages. This question is asking me about the early Middle Ages. So how did the Silk Road impact warfare? We know warfare has been going on since the beginning of time, but how did this Silk Road impact warfare? Was there really a road called the Silk Road? Think about it. But what was considered the Silk Road? You got to really think back. Look at your choices. How did the Silk Road impact warfare during the early Middle Ages? So I'll just let the cat out the bag. There is no road back then in the early Middle Ages that was called the Silk Road. There wasn't a Gold Street and a Silver Avenue and a Silk Road and a Satin Boulevard. That did not exist. But there was something happening that was called the Silk Road. And how did that impact warfare during the early Middle Ages? Let's see. Well, we've got some real confident people here. We've got a D, and then we've got all B's. B's for everything else. Anybody want to come off of mute and tell me why you chose the answer that you chose? I see Lauren here says, I feel like it's B because there wasn't necessarily just massive amounts of weaponry floating around. Okay. We're talking about the early Middle Ages. Okay. Good explanation. Why else would someone have chosen B or D? Thank you.
I chose B because when I think of the Middle Ages, I think about the Western civilizations, and then what the Western and the and like you stated, them like it's tons of them, like the Middle Ages and their civilizations. And then I also was thinking about, when I think about the Silk Road, I think about gunpowder, during that time frame of the Western civilizations, if that makes sense. I was like thinking about the Western, like when I thought about it.
And I'm not sure from what you said, if you were talking about Western, like Gunsmoke Western.
Yes. Like them, I guess, like trading it, importing and exporting it.
Remember, this is world history. So we're not in the United States. We're talking about world history. Although that was quite interesting. That was very interesting, but we're talking about outside of the United States. Like the United States is not even in existence during the early Middle Ages. Okay. Well, it could be, but the people who lived over here were not the people that came over from Europe. They were people that were already here. So we're not talking about Gunsmoke
Mhm.
or cowboys and Native Americans.
Yes, because that's what was going through my mind. So to be
That's
honest, I took
okay.
an educated guess because
Yeah,
to be
that's
honest, I don't really know much about the Silk Road, but when I think about it, I just think about, like you say, like the cowboys and then the exporting and importing. But you are
okay.
absolutely right because I think I'm mixing it in
With American.
with American. Yes.
Yeah, with Americans. So remember that you're in the world history, because there may be some answer choices under this world, because the questions will be divided. And there may be some questions that have answer choices that make you think about America, make you think about North America, make you think about the United States. And then you have to catch yourself and say, oh no, I'm in the world history section, so I know this is not a possible answer. So if you're not familiar with the early Middle Ages or just the Middle Ages period, if you're not familiar with the Middle Ages, then make yourself a note to find out what was going on in the Middle Ages, what made the Middle Ages divide between early, middle, and late Middle Ages, what was going on, what was happening, and what countries were affected by the Middle Ages. And what is this Silk Road? If you're not sure what that is, then look that up. Make yourself a note, because you really need to know about the Silk Road. And like I said, it wasn't an actual dirt road. The Silk Road is where trafficking happened. There was traffic happening on this trail of a path, for lack of a better word, a journey that was called the Silk Road. And of course, silk was something that was traded on this road. So thus it got the name Silk Road. But how did the Silk Road impact warfare during the early Middle Ages? Now, trading was very important to people. It's still important today, but trading was even more important back then. So the correct answer is B. B, gunpowder and fireworks is mentioned in Chinese history long before being seen in weaponry, believe it or not. However, once it was traded along the Silk Road, gunpowder was refined, and that's how cannons came about, which brings us to the present day Western civilizations, and they were used in as an advantage in war. So gunpowder was the correct answer. B, gunpowder was traded along this route to Western civilizations. But these Western civilizations, when you look up early Middle Ages, they're not talking about the United States. So make yourself a note to find out what are the actual civilizations that are being referred to as Western civilizations. And if there were Western civilizations, that means there were Eastern civilizations. So make yourself a note to know, okay, what were those civilizations? And what actually, where was the Silk Road? What was that path or that journey of the Silk Road? What was that? Because there was much trade done on the Silk Road. The ideology of fascism or fascism is defined by all of the following characteristics except. And we've heard fascism even as late as in the last month in our own news here in our country. So if you're not sure what that is, make yourself a note to look that up. The ideology of fascism is defined by at least 3 of these characteristics, but one it's not. So think about it. I hope you're trusting yourself and you're not going to Google and asking Google. Trust yourself. Take an educated guess. I am super proud of you guys. I think you all have gotten more right than you've gotten incorrect, which is great. Excellent, excellent. Let's see what we have in the chat. We've got C, we've got B or C. Okay. And it's okay. You're making educated guesses. That's what this is all about. Making an educated guess. And if you don't know what a word means, please make a note and look it up. Look it up. If you're not sure what ultranationalism is, make a note to look that up. We've got, let's see, C, B or C. Anybody else want to add to our choices here? We think it's either B or C. Anyone want to come off of mute? Tell us what your thinking was on why you chose B or C or A or D. All right, Lauren says, I felt it was C because A and D mirror the idea of complete control, while C illustrates freedom. Okay. I like how you're thinking. I like how you're thinking. And remember, sometimes these kind of accept questions and not questions can get us tripped up. But if you would look at them as, okay, it's going to be the one that's left over. So whatever that statement is saying, 3 of my 4 choices are going to meet what it says in that statement. The ideology of fascism is defined by all of 3 of these. One of these it doesn't. So fascism is defined by dictatorial control of power. It's defined by ultranationalism, I mean. So it's fascism. The ideology of fascism is defined by dictatorial control of power, by ultranationalism, and by repression of opposition. So the one it's not is going to be freedom in civil society. Fascist governments restrict civil society as a means of hampering opposition. So I hope that when you see the not and you see the accept, that you think about, okay, 3 of my 4 options are going to make this statement true. And then the one that's left over is my answer. I hope that helps. All right, time is getting away from us and we're going to move on. Test taking reminders. We are coming to the end of our presentation and we have test taking tips, reminders for you. So I will give you a moment to look at those. You see, skip the hard questions. There is much research out there about the best way or the best approach to test taking. And if you're in the classroom already, you may tell your students a certain method to use. I personally like to go to my easy questions or my questions that I know without a shadow of a doubt, I know the answer to. I like to go to them first. And so I'm all for skipping the hard questions. And so when you take this test, you're going to be able to move about the test freely. You can go from question number 40 back to number 12, or you can go in chronological order, sequential order. You can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and go through each one that way. You also will be able to mark, okay, I need to go back to this test. To this test question. And you may find that an answer comes up in another question to the answer that you marked to go back to the question you marked to go back to. So what I'm trying to say is use the information in your test questions to help you if you're struggling answering other test questions. And then by all means, use those test questions and those answer choices to help you when you get to your constructed response questions. Because I really believe that those test questions and those answers can really help you and guide you and bring back to your remembrance some answers to those constructed response questions. Just a couple of more sentences that you can add to an answer that maybe you've already come up with and you feel good about. Think if you have time, go back and look at some of those questions and throw in additional information just to reinforce something that you've already put down for your constructed response question. So read your questions and all your possible answers thoroughly. You want to make sure that you are selecting the correct answer for that question and you feel good about your answer choice. Pace yourself. I put on here this little clock. Keep track of time. Keep track of your time. And I know that's a lot, but you can do it. There's going to be a clock or a time, a digital time on your computer screen. And so you should be able to keep up with how long you're spending on each question. Just like we tell so many of our students, you want to try to target anywhere from 1 to 2 minutes on your questions. You want to allow yourself more time on your constructed response questions. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Perkins. Yes,
Please check the chat.
okay. Let's see. All right, does the scoring of this test function like the ACT where you're rewarded for correct answers and not penalized for incorrect? Unfortunately, it says, well, Ms. Perkins put on here correct. Okay, but I want to strongly suggest to you that you answer all your questions. If at all possible, answer your questions. You have an opportunity to get that question correct. If you just halfway think you know the correct answer, I would just strongly encourage you to put down that answer that you feel strongly about. But it does, she did say on here that you're not penalized for incorrect. So that means if you miss a question, am I understanding that correctly, Ms. Perkins? Is that what you're saying? If you ignore a question, that's not going to be held against you. Is that what you're saying? Okay. So if you feel like you know the correct answer, I want to encourage you to go ahead and put down the correct answer. Those constructed response questions are a great opportunity for you to get maximum points. So read those scenarios, read through those, and try your best to answer those constructed response questions. And it's called constructed response because there are going to be various parts to it, various parts to the question. And you're going to have to put all that together for your answer. Another question was, where do you get the study guide for the test? If you go to the Praxis, I'm not sure, your school probably has a couple in the library, would be my guess. Ms. Perkins would know that for sure, but I'm guessing there are probably some available for you to check out in your library, but I know that you can purchase them online at the ETS website for Praxis. You can also purchase them at your local bookstore as well. So they are available. Ms. Perkins has an answer to you in the text. You can use the LIP guide and the Praxis resources that are on the Praxis page. Yeah. I personally did take advantage of the study guides. I didn't buy all the study guides for all the Praxis tests I took, but I did find that those study guides were very useful and helpful. So use your energy to answer your questions and not express frustration. So try not to get to the point where you're upset with yourself while you're taking the test. Try to keep a good frame of mind and just go through the questions, read the questions fully, and then answer the questions to the best of your ability. If you have time, check your answers. And I know we tell our students that, I've told my students that year after year after year, assessment after assessment, very few students over the years have actually taken time to go back and check their answers. But if you have time left, even just a few minutes of time, go back and check your answers. It's so easy to read a question initially, and then after you've gone through several other questions, the correct answer comes to your mind. Like, oh, I wonder, did I put this answer down? So if you have time, go back and check the answers that you've already selected. There is a website and a link. I guess I should say, I think that's a link. It looks like it's a live link that you can go to. How many answers do you have to get correct of the 60 to pass? And don't be scared of these constructed response questions, because you can put together an answer. Let me Google that right quick. I'm not exactly sure how many you have to get correct to pass. Do not have that information off the top of my head. See if I can find out right quick. Okay. And I'm sorry, I don't have that answer off the top of my head, but I'm going to look right quick and see if I can get that answer for you. Let's see, I don't have my scores in front of me to share with you, but what I see online just says there's no set number of questions that students need to get right in order to pass the Praxis. This is because there's several different versions of each test, so I'm not sure about the social studies test. There's going to be varying difficulty with the questions, so I'm not exactly sure what number you have to score. Of course, there are raw scores that are converted to scaled scores. So unfortunately, I do not know that number. So I appreciate you asking that question, and I will try to find that out and get that information to Ms. Perkins to share with you all, because right now I do not know. And as far as the constructed response questions, I think you guys are going to spend some time maybe talking about, we didn't have time tonight, but talking about possible constructed response questions and how to answer those questions. But we all know that you definitely need to make sure that you have answered what it is that they're asking you in paragraph form, kind of like a short essay is what they're going to be looking for. And there are some YouTube videos out there, as Ms. Perkins has put in the chat, that you could take advantage of that do talk about the constructed response questions. I know when I have taken all my Praxis that had a constructed response question part or component, I just wrote everything I could think of that would relate to that question. Remember, everything that you write in your response needs to relate back to what they're actually asking you in the question. You don't want to just give them information just to give them information. Hey, I know about this, I know about that. Make sure that everything that you put in that constructed response question is leading back to that question and what they've asked you specifically in that question. Are there any other questions that you guys might have? All right, I'm not sure of that answer to that question, Ariana. I'm sure Ms. Perkins can answer that for you. You guys have been absolutely wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you so very much. Here is my information. It has been my pleasure to be with you all. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Ms. Perkins. Are there any other questions that you might have? Any other questions? Thank you all so very much for coming. I appreciate this opportunity, Ms. Perkins. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Do call on me again. It has been my pleasure, and your students have been absolutely wonderful. Have been absolutely wonderful. You guys are smarter than you think. You're going to do well. You're going to do well. Contact me with your questions. You can contact Ms. Perkins. We are ready resources for you, and we want you to do well. Here are some references I used. And again, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you. You guys are too kind. There's going to be a survey that's going to come out. Please take time to complete that survey.